Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and it's time for your Saturday's Comics Aficionados. We got a great panel for you today, and we're going to kind of follow up on an earlier video in the week where we kind of talk about the worst decisions in comic book history. A lot of great feedback. A lot of people had other things that they thought should have been discussed or needed to be discussed, so I picked out 8 of those viewer comments. We're going to talk about them live here today, and to talk with me about this are some of my good friends. First, the new star of Thinking Critical, the man they want me to hand the platform over to because he's got better ideas. He's a better speaker than me. Gervain, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Wes. Like I said, don't put that heat on me, y'all. Don't put that heat on me, all right? I'm doing good. Glad to be back.
I'm glad you could make it. It was a little bit late notice. We had a panel member fall out, and Gervain was able to make it back on, so really appreciate that. With us from Fantastic Comics is Jewel Carter. How you doing?
Wonderful. I have an open store now, and I'm actually selling comic books.
Wow.
Hey,
first
congratulations.
Hey.
Nice.
In 2 months.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah. Since March 15th or something like that. It's I was going a little stir crazy, so I'm really happy to be out of the house talking to people again.
Yes. That's awesome. All right. And, he doesn't sound curmudgeon-y right now, but I'm sure he's going to get a little salty somewhere along the line. Haley, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's the world is on fire. Comics are on fire. We're on fire. We're here to burn it down today. So here we go.
Yeah, we're gonna burn
look on Wes's face.
Jesus Christ! All right, Doc, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. I'm not setting fire on anything yet.
There you go. Yeah,
I'm glad to hear that. And then, last but not least, is the newsman here on Thinking Critical. He's got all the scoops. How you doing, Perch?
I think I'm least. I'm doing okay. With this crowd, I'm definitely least.
So we had a pretty interesting video. It was Yule and Perch and myself, and it wasn't planned or anything. I knew the first decision I was going to talk about was, Marvel replacing all of their heroes as the MCU was blowing up and how baffling that was, and the opportunity lost, and it kind of the conversation expanded from there. We had a lot of good things to talk about, but you really can't cover a topic that interesting in 20 minutes alone. Like I said, we got a ton of great feedback, lots of great comments from the viewers, and we're going to cover 8 of those today. Are you guys ready for the first comment?
Yep.
All right. This is from Dorigo Duke. DC's decision to end the original Crisis by destroying the simple, elegant, beautiful solution to continuity conundrums that was the multiverse. Gervain, I know you spoke up on this one in the comments yourself. I know you agreed with it. What is he speaking truth here?
He's speaking truth here. I love the DC multiverse pre-1985. I didn't think it was that hard to understand. To me, it always felt like from the outside that DC was just doing it to make it more easy to understand for maybe licensors or merchandisers. But I think for those who were in the comic community or even people who were new to it, it just didn't make any sense. It wasn't hard to figure out. There was like 3 or 4 or 5 different Earths with 3 or 4 or 5 different Supermans. And I thought that was a lot of the charm of the DC universe. And then the decision was only made worse or more insane by the fact that as soon as they got it done, nobody followed it. Everybody just apparently just did what they wanted to do and just basically defeated the whole purpose, undermined the whole purpose of creating Crisis in the first place. And to Dorigo Duke's point, and the real fall, that was Hawkman. Now he's right. It's virtually that character is pointless. No matter who tries to bring it back, who tries to redo the character just makes no sense because you have to just keep referring to this jacked up continuity. That if you had it under the pre-85 DC multiverse, Hawk World would have just been another world in that universe, and that would have been the end of it. So I agree. I think DC was doing it for all the wrong reasons. We're always jumping this thing about continuity and how hard continuity is to follow, and how continuity is a drag and makes it difficult for new readers. And I just never heard that from anyone in terms of continuity being like this boondoggle that holds comics back. So yeah, I enjoyed Crisis, but it was a mistake.
Yeah, that was definitely a Dan Didio thing. But I do want to thank David Deister for the $10 super chat. There are 10 events I could think of, like One More Day and Amazon's Attack. We've talked about One More Day a lot on the channel, and that's definitely a huge black eye on Marvel Comics. They kind of try to avoid it, but although it's still in continuity right now. Doc, what do you think about Amazon's Attack? Was that a mistake?
Never really read Amazon's Attack. I'm not a huge Wonder Woman fan.
Well, Amazon Attack. I mean, there's been worse. That wasn't a shining moment for DC by any stretch of the imagination, but I think there's worse. But I'm with you on One More Day. Amazon's Attack, it felt like we were just going back to the well really, really quickly with an event, I think.
Yeah, so there's a lot of events that I think have put stains on the comic book industry. The most recent, I think, would be Heroes in Crisis. You've got Age of X-Men there as well. But David, thank you so much for the super chat. Very generous of you to support the channel like that, and I appreciate you being a part of the conversation. So getting back to the DC basically blowing up their continuity. Perch, I know we've talked about this before. Dan Didio, while he was at DC, it seemed like he always had a stick up his ass about DC's continuity and thinking that it was so confusing that it was a barrier for people to come in. But every time they try to fix it, it seems they make everything worse.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a great one, I think, because comic companies, Marvel and DC, they both seem to get this idea in their head that they need to fix something. Like, the continuity is too tough. Spider-Man's marriage is too weird. They get in their head that this is a major problem, and so they set out to fix it. And I mean, I'm trying to think of an example where they actually fixed it successfully. Every single time they've done this, it feels like within a year or so they're trying to go back to it, or the fans are angry. It's like there was no need. Crisis was not confusing to people. There's this belief at times that the fans and the readers are dumb. They couldn't possibly understand these comics that we're doing, and it always is proven time and time again not to be the case. You know, comic customers are okay with comics they haven't read. They're okay with going back and looking at continuity. If they don't understand something, they tend to go check it out, which means more business. It's a weird thing that they always try and solve these problems that do not need to be solved.
I think that might be one example where they got it right, which was, I think, was Batman: The New Adventures at one point, where they just kind of rebooted Jason Todd into the. Now, people didn't like that version of it, but in terms of it didn't feel as disruptive as some other attempts have been made in the past, and you just could. I jumped in maybe in the middle, right when he did it, and it just kind of flowed. And you knew something was different, but it wasn't like this earth-shaking thing, or like everything I read before that was destroyed, other than just rebooting the Todd character.
Yeah, I think that's solid. I think that's a good example. I mean, there are examples. They're much fewer than the mistakes. And sometimes you get somebody who maybe has a plan. Like I think Hickman was trying to solve some things with Secret Wars, but then the second it was over, things went right back. Like nobody paid any attention to any of it, and so it's like, well, okay, that was no solution. It's weird. I've never understood the fans cannot understand continuity argument. It's always been a very weird one to me.
Pele, is that as stupid to you as the argument that like superheroes can't be happy, or if they get married and have kids, it makes them feel too old? So you get the things like David brought up with like One More Day, or Bruce can't get married, or we got to kill off legacy characters in DC because if all the Robins grow up, that means Batman's 90.
Well, I just don't understand. DC can't handle 4 or 5 worlds, different variant worlds and continuity. Marvel juggles like 4,500, and no, it's not to say that Marvel's continuity is really that great. It's not. There's a lot of problems with Marvel, but DC's was like a complete art of simplicity in comparison to what Marvel juggled and still juggles to this day. And nobody complained. Honest to God, if anybody had any questions, what's the deal with this Earth 2? What's the 5-minute explanation? Everything was square. Guys, oh, great. Goes and he knows what he wants to buy. Justice Society is over here. Justice League is over here. This Superman, it's really easy to explain. Try explaining the Marvel Universe multiverse to somebody. You know, you're there for like 3-4 hours and they're still scratching their heads. You know, this is not a problem. They're applying a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. You know, they're trying to fix a non-existent problem, and I can understand that they're hoping to, you know, simplify. But you simplify something to the point to where it becomes useless, or it becomes so rudimentary and elementary that it loses its appeal. And it's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons players are familiar with this, where the old D&D rules had contradictions, they had problems with them, but they had an incredible flavor and incredible balance. And now they've gone back to simplifying things with 5th edition, to where it was just like, this is stupid, this is dumb. You've now made it to where, you know, this is like the Fisher-Price version of Dungeons and Dragons, and this is what DC has done too. They made the Fisher-Price version of DC Comics, and it's sad, and it's completely unnecessary.
So I did want to say thank you very much to Nola Nerd, Who Dat, $10 super chat. Thank you very much for being generous and supporting the channel. Good morning, everyone. Here's some support while listening at work today. Hopefully you're selling lots of fruit and things or vegetables on the farmer's market. I really love Aficionados streams. Thank you all for being here. The worst storyline off the top of my head is Secret Empire, and that is a damn bad storyline. I don't think anyone really liked that one at all. There was a follow-up, and I want to ask you about this one, Yule. Could there be a reboot of DC or Marvel again that maybe gets it right next time?
Ooh, I don't know if they could get it right necessarily, but I really thought that they should have just done the reboot now. When we were all just like, you know, hanging out, there was nothing. Just like, you know, let's just start all over, please. You know, put Batman with some shorts on again, maybe, or do you figure out what you really want,
no.
you know, and
like
not short
shorts?
not short shorts, you know, on the outside.
Like compression
you know.
pants?
Yeah, sure, why not? Oh, he should, soft pants or hard pants, like this, you know. Since we've been quarantined, people are saying, "Oh, I'm calling my sweatpants soft pants now."
Is Batman gonna start being sponsored by Lululemon?
Should totally, I don't know if they. I mean, it's like we were saying after Secret Wars that Hickman did. There was a perfect time to restart everything. You know, you could build, but they don't ever have a real plan on where they're going after they destroy something. They're like, oh, hey, we can get to the point where we start all over. I don't know what I'm going to do next. Going back to the original concept of the crisis and why they would do that, I kind of think DC has always had that that visual that they are an old person's company. You know, they always feel like an Oldsmobile. Whereas Marvel and their continuity always seemed to, like, if something happened over here, it affected something over here. And they felt like, you know, they're new, a souped up sports car, and DC's always striving to do that. So why would they change their universe? It might not be because someone didn't understand it necessarily. It's just because they weren't making as much money and they were emulating what Marvel was doing. And kind of like what Gervain said about Hawkman, the Legion of Superheroes was the main sticking point why they could never move Crisis on Infinite Earths, you know, go past that, because that they were still the time travel people that witnessed Superboy at a certain time, and all these other things that happened really screwed up the universes still. And they actually, even though they got rid of Earth 2 and Earth 3 and all that other stuff, they still didn't. They had one main sticking point, and they tried all during Legion of Superheroes to fix it with the time traveler and all that other stuff, but they didn't do it. And
I think right now the most compelling of the DC universes is, God, I hate to admit it, but Tom Taylor's Deceased universe. It's actually got a really amazing storyline right now, you know, and you've got, you know, it's really fantastic. I've enjoyed the all the various branch offs from it, and Tom Taylor is absolute poison for Marvel, but In DC, he's fantastic. So that's the most compelling story, that's the most compelling universe right now in DC is that, and everything else is just a bloody mess.
Certainly had the most hard hitting, like impactful moments. Like personally, like did you almost squirt a little tear out when Superman was saying goodbye to John when he realized he was infected?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that was powerful. And it's like you seeing the heroes just drop one by one, and then the ones that did survive, and now you've got the colony off world, but they've still got the issue with Superman and the sun, and and it's just Superman Prime is showing up now to try to fix this, and it's just like, whoa, this is good. It's good reading, and they really need to take note.
But they don't have all that continuity they have to wade through. I mean, they can pick and choose what they want to, but since they're going and destroying characters whenever they want, and they don't have to follow any real guideline necessarily, right?
Well, it's not, and that's the thing too. The anti-life equation, that's at fault for creating all the zombies and everything like that. Ultimately, I think that there's going to be a cure, a solution to this, and the heroes that are still around that have been zombified or whatever, that there is going to be a cure provided, depending on who's still around in one piece. But I still think it's still the most it's the most amazing story out there as far as DC is concerned. Maybe even comics in general.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's get over to a Marvel bad decision, and we'll throw this one to Doc, the Marvel aficionado himself, the X-Men lover. Marvel not wanting to get out royalties, the legacy of Stan Lee. Is that part of Stan Lee's legacy? I think we all love him as the spokesman, as kind of the face of the franchise, the face of really the entire industry. But he certainly played a part in the royalties that are lackluster for Marvel creators.
Yeah. Stan had his way of doing business, and it worked for them for a very long time until it stopped. I mean, that's kind of really what it comes down to. It stopped really working for them. They weren't paying the royalties that they should have been. But again, a lot of when a lot of the characters and things were created, nobody expected the merchandising, the secondary, tertiary revenue sources, or even reprints. I mean, even reprinting stuff was incredibly rare. So, you create a character or create some books, and they were what sold for that month, and that was it. And you know what? When that is your only revenue stream, then I understood the no royalties thing. You get paid you get more work. Your royalties back then were you got another contract, you got another assignment. You kept working. But once the publishers started being able to double, triple, quadruple dip into the work that you're creating for them, and their reluctance to give royalties on it is kind of a stain on his legacy.
Yeah, they wouldn't deal with the fact that, basically when it came to creating the books, it was no longer, and I think I'm using this right, it was no longer a sunk cost. It wasn't like, oh, I paid this out and I can, other than the initial money that I made, I can't continue to make money on it. And they never adjusted. I mean, it sounds like from now that people looking back with Alan Moore and that deal with Watchmen, it was like, it was a bad deal apparently because nobody anticipated the trade paperback market, or at the very least, something like Watchmen being perpetually in print is just that for me, this kind of ties into like one of my, I thought, insane decisions was Marvel letting Image happen. And so it was like, you had like 3, 4, 5, or 7 of the hottest guys in the industry. It was like, dude, just cut them a new deal, cut them something that, recognize is what they contributed to the company, and let's keep moving on and keep this money train going. But I guess people just don't like making money in comics. I'm not sure what that's about. Just don't like making money.
Well, it's always been, and it's been lately, that the motivation in comics is their story, their narrative, not making money, not doing business, and that's the root of the problem. It's been the root of the problem for over a decade now, and I don't see it changing until somebody really high up steps on it and says, you're going to fix this, or else. So
I'm not sure this is, I don't know if this is necessarily a new thing. I think this has kind of always been some of comics. I mean, there's been different eras where they've done different things and they'd have different motivations. But one of the things that happened to comics pretty aggressively in the late 80s, I'm glad you brought up Image, because it's a great example of this. The business changed and the companies were not quick to change with it. And it's not, so it's not like people at Marvel, for example, were sitting around going, we don't want to pay Todd McFarlane, just let him go, it's fine, just get out of here. It's more like suddenly the business bubble expanded a lot and none of the people in charge knew what to do with that expansion. So they were still playing by the old rules. And the old rules are, well, yeah, let him go, we'll build up a new hero, we'll build up a new talent. They didn't recognize that things shifted. The same thing happened when now suddenly comics are being billion-dollar movies. And I believe the comics industry still doesn't fully understand this concept, or at least has digested it, that these properties are massive. I did a video on the Alan Moore situation. I think that's a good illustration in many ways of where, everybody who started that deal, including Alan Moore, were happy with the deal that was signed at the beginning. I mean, Alan Moore made comments that he thought it was a good deal. And then suddenly it's like, well, the world changed. It's like, well, now your deal doesn't look so good anymore. And that sucks. Mm-hmm. But it's not necessarily like, DC, in that case, set out to screw Alan Moore. It's that the world changed dramatically. And, and they don't know what to do with it. And the comments that you're putting on the board, both from Brian and Mr. Thunderbuns, it is this case where it is a funny industry. Sean Gordon Murphy said it too. If you are making money or express a desire to make money, it's like you are betraying the nature of a starving artist. You're betraying that soul of comics, and it's all the same thing. These are people who do not know what to do when the world expands, and if they can't figure it out fast enough, they miss that opportunity. The world contracts again, and everybody lives maybe where they're more comfortable, but they miss an opportunity to actually do a lot more, make a lot more. And I think we're seeing that right now.
Do you think it's because, like, in comics, so few people make a lot of money? When they actually see someone making money, they're like, don't tell me about it.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think there's some hard jealousy in this. You just, if you go to a con and you go to one of the bars or you hang out with some of the creators, it turns nasty really quickly on the successful people. They are, it's just, there's not the, man, how do we get that kind of money? Or how can we do something to get in that place? It's, man, they cheated to get there. It's a behavior. And unfortunately, this is a little bit human nature we're talking about right now, of just being jealous of others.
Well, it's
like here's Al Ewing's quote here. Al Ewing's quote basically says it all here, that financial viability is the enemy of the comic book industry.
Yeah.
Al Ewing's
and I'm
like,
what? Yeah, and it's like, what? And he was applauded for this. And it's like, God.
Well, because, so you try and look at the reason behind this. It's because comics, the people who work in it, lots of them are coming from the art community. They maybe got into it for passion or romance or other reasons, and they're having a hard time kind of flipping that switch to let's go make money. And when all of your peers are going, we got into it for romance. Why are you talking about making bank? It's a weird social pressure that goes on. It's
the same way that artists have issues with commercial artists. They're just commercial artists. Their work is looked down upon.
Exactly.
And the same way that but if one of the artists manages to make it big, somehow they're now a sellout, the same way that, you used to hear about it like 80s punk bands. 80s punk band gets signed to a big label, suddenly they're a friggin' sellout.
Yeah.
No, they just Yeah,
it's got to be college radio stations all the way, or else you're a sellout.
Yes. Yeah, like
it creates such weird behavior. Look at Neil Gaiman, who is very rich. He is rich. I think a lot of people seem to forget that because he'll make comments every now and then about money isn't important and the comics are they're their own romance. It's like, well, that's cool for you to say, but you're loaded. You're doing very well. With the recent you in the news, we've seen pictures of your house. You're doing a lot better than that person making $40,000 in Manhattan.
Half better.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm
my
just
wife.
joking.
My wife is a professional artist, and my wife's a professional artist, and she, gets these offers to do art jobs, do sculptures for different institutions and stuff like that. And they say, oh, well, we've chosen you. We want you to do this sculpture, this bust or whatever, and she's like, okay, what's the, what are you paying? What's the, what are you going to pay hourly rate? And they're like, pay. This is an opportunity for you to make a statement. This is an artistic expression piece, and she's like, yeah, what are you going to pay me? How much?
I've seen a lot of comics. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's just like, she's like, well, if you're not going to pay me, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of comic artists talk about how they are told that they are going to get exposure and stuff like that if they just do it, for free, basically. And they probably have already done that if you're coming up with that idea already, and their exposure probably isn't that great already, also. So yeah, it's kind of like the same thing with comics.
It was weird. Mark Millar did a bit where he opened up a contest to do, I think, a splash page or a cover or something for Kick-Ass. And the reward was going to be you get printed and you get some exposure. And he kind of mentioned it like that. And this is a little bit of a different situation. This is like fan art being a variant cover. It was not, no, it wasn't just a cover. Sorry, there was a short story in there. But it was still, it was a little bit different. And he got just reamed by all the artists about, you can't make people work for free. There were editors at Marvel who were talking about this was slimy of him doing it. But at the same time, they were then turning around and offering peanuts to people to draw full issues. So this is a very hypocritical, strange world that we get into. And the solution I've seen when this has happened in gaming or tech or any other place where you have this going on, because same thing goes on in gaming all the time, is you have to have somebody generally at the top mentoring the developers that, hey, you need to look out for yourself. You need to plan that savings account. You need to do your 401k. You need to hustle for your own bank. You need to, this is what a good mentor or a good leader does. But in comics, the mentors and the leaders enjoy paying you nothing. So they're not going to ever step up and do that.
Yeah, and I agree with Perch because I think a lot of what this is that it's this confusion between being a fine artist and a commercial artist, which I think what you guys are saying. So having been both in both of those worlds, most people understand a fine artist, the reason why you have that mentality that, oh, it's my art and it's pure and I shouldn't get paid for it is because you have a patron. There's somebody who literally says, I'm going to take care of your room and board. I'm going to supply your materials because all I want you to do is express your vision so we can get it out into the world. A publisher is not your patron. A publisher is a guy that's trying to make money. And he's trying to make money any way that he can. And sometimes he'll make money by playing to your fine artist sensibilities about your art to basically get you to take, a nickel and dime deal and never think about, oh, if this thing ever blows up, you should get a cut of that. And because I just find it interesting, how does the industry reconcile the whole effort in the 70s with I believe it was Neil Adams when they were trying to get Siegel and Schuster the credit for the Superman and also to get some money on it. And they used the movie to do that. There seemed to be an understanding that, you can be a creator, but it's okay to make some money too, because you don't want to end up like these two guys. Or even with Jack Kirby, who basically felt, is all but the co-author of the Marvel Universe. But that's one sad story that Mark Vayner told about, like, he couldn't even walk into like a Toys R Us because he just couldn't take the fact of knowing that they were making all this money basically off of his ideas. I mean, I think you have to break that thing of like the shaming that because I'm a commercial artist, it doesn't mean you can't do your art, but you know what? Take care of your bottom line. There's no, because everybody else is. Everybody else is looking out for theirs. So,
well, it's almost like they romanticize the like 15th century.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you really want to go back? You go find a member of the landed gentry and get yourself a patron, and then be, live in a little shack with nothing but oil paints, and have fun with that.
Yep.
But don't shame other people for wanting to make actually, I don't know, eat and like make their own money.
All right, guys. So we covered two of the topics. The next one is from Bucket Think Tank, and he says one of the most insane decisions in comic book history is making Barbara Gordon no longer Oracle, and also not keeping Jeff Johns on during Rebirth. Yule, which one do you think is worse, making Barbara not Oracle, or not keeping Jeff Johns as the creative director of Rebirth?
Wow, I didn't know it was going to be that way.
Well, you can
no, it's all right. No, I'm just joking. I think the Oracle decision was bad, but it's understandable under the auspices of the new 52 why they did it. It's funny that they would want to create characters so that they could identify with so many people, and the one that they actually did that was naturally, came out natural out of Killing Joke was Barbara Gordon being Oracle. They put a lot of time and a lot of effort, and what you don't realize is that she's a woman in a wheelchair, and there are people out there that identify that way, But I think worse was Jeff Johns not continuing on Rebirth. Again, there was reasons for that, with the movie division and everything, but Rebirth was doing so well, and yeah, I like Jeff Johns also, so I don't think that was a good move. That was the one.
It does feel like a bad thing. It's not like Marvel has Daredevil. They have but DC had Oracle, which was like their handicapped superhero, and she wasn't just a regular character. She was extremely effective. I think people liked her a lot. So I think they probably should have kept Oracle around. Perch, what were your thoughts about them replacing or going back to her Batgirl persona?
No, I mean, I think you'll hit the nail on the head. I get why they did it, and it simplifies. It almost goes back to that first one we talked about. It's like let's not worry about continuity. I think people at DC, for whatever reason, I know Gail Simone was one, but others, even though Gail Simone spent a lot of time building up Oracle, there was this feeling like what happened in Killing Joke was unacceptable for comics. We can't have that as part of our history. It's wrong. So we need to start to erase it. But they did such good things with that. I mean, she was a character. I think you're exactly right. I made this case a while back. It's not a wrong idea to say we want to have characters out there that everybody that can identify with so people can see themselves. That's a cool idea. The challenge is when you do it badly. And Barbara Gordon was done great. I mean, that really was, I don't know. This is where I'm thinking off the top of my head. I mean, more than a decade. How many years? Like 20 maybe of building the character that way? That's a lot of time. And you go to cons, you talk about people's favorite character, Oracle would come up a lot. And it's like, I don't know why you would do that, why you would take something successful, something that did reach out to maybe a handicapped community and say, look, here's a superhero who's handicapped that we have, 100+ issues or more where it's shown. It's weird. It's like just seizing defeat from the jaws of victory. It was a very strange decision.
Yeah, and then they end up releasing Killing Joke as like an animated movie anyway. So they're like, it's not like they're not embracing the story.
Sure. I mean, none of this makes a whole lot of sense. And this is why, maybe you just need, I'll tie it to the second one too. You need some business people in charge who's going to look at this and maybe take emotion out of it and go, hey, wait a minute, this is good for our line. This is money. Let's, we all want to do artistic fun things, but every now and then we should actually look back at what pays the bills.
Mm-hmm.
And whoever remembers the outrage from 20 years ago?
Sure.
I mean, the character was legit. She was legitimately embraced by the community. It was a strong character. There were a whole bunch of stories that came out of that. But I mean, I remember when they quoted the actress who played played Batgirl in the '66 series about how she said how horrible it was. But this was nowhere near women in refrigerators territory. It was like the character had become beloved. It was like nobody remembered, except for us. Nobody remembers 20 years ago, everybody was mad about what happened in Killing Joke. It was like,
But people are mad at. But people are always mad at Alan Moore, and then they started looking at all the rapes that he has in his comic books, and there was actually a conversation about that. And he's like, if you look at comics that are violent, the one kind of violence that's never actually talked about is rape in comic books. And so I do it, and it's actually, if I do it all the time, it's still just like 1%, And I think, and someone in chat was saying that they didn't ignore Killing Joke, but they kind of did. They've really kind of glossed over it. They don't want to talk about it as much. And just the fact that they healed, like she did get shot. She did get in a wheelchair. Those things in Birds of Prey, I guess, still happen and all that stuff because New 52 5 years thing is stupid. But how does a character, come back from, this spinal damage? And why this character when some other character had a tragic disease and Dr. Fate could have done some magical thing to bring them back also and stuff like that? Real world implications are tough to solve, and that's why Oracle was so beloved. I think she kicked ass in a wheelchair. She was buff still. She was still Batgirl. She had a great mind, and she led all the Batman characters. Like if they had a problem and they needed some info, and obviously we don't have the cell phones then like we do now. Nobody needs Oracle when they got a cell phone these days.
You got Google. You got Google and Wikipedia now. Oracle's not.
I don't know. Have you? Alexa doesn't do a good job with. Alexa just doesn't do a good job with actually tracking down bad guys, though. That's
they need that. They need that kid with the internet gas.
Give me some internet gas.
All right, guys. So I want to say thank you very much to KVI for the $10 super chat. The increase in executive meddling as a result of the popularity of the movies with the big two, Marvel and DC, have always been owned by someone else, but they more or less left their creatives alone before. Gervain, do you see that being a problem now where people are starting to meddle as they want to maybe influence the direction of their characters moving forward?
That I'm not sure about that one. I mean, this maybe kind of ties into I've jotted down my own worst decisions, which was DCU, which I brought this up at another show, which I could not figure out for the life of me where that came from. It's like, who are they trying to sell these books to? Where does this dictate come from? It just seemed like pure insanity. It just came and went like the craziness that it was. But I think talking to some people that I know in the industry, it almost seems to be the exact opposite in a sense. It's that the executives really don't care about what goes on in the books. If they do, they give like some fleeting dictate that we needed to look like this or to appeal to this. And then the creatives take that and just run with it in a way that it's like nobody's really considering who they're selling these books to. So I don't know if it's like somebody, I don't know if it's like other than Ike Perlmutter on High, when he was just mad about the whole fact that they didn't own X-Men and the Fantastic Four, and we got that nonsense that came out of Marvel, where basically the Inhumans were now the new X-Men, and the Fantastic Four got scattered to the four winds of the Marvel Multiverse. I mean, that point taken on that, but I think other than something like that, I don't really think the executives know or care about what goes on in these books, other than to say, what was that? Spiders are the most dangerous animals in the animal kingdom. Superman, the next Superman movie needs to have a spider, that kind of stuff, maybe. But yeah, other than Ike Perlmutter with that thing, that's the only time I can see executive meddling really dictating what's going on at the big two. I don't see it for the most part. I might be wrong, but I don't see it.
I mean, if anything, there's some evidence to the opposite. I think that you had the Marvel Creative Committee that kind of tried to push their way up into the movies and kind of got rebuffed back down. And it felt like after that moment, a lot of people within the comic division, at least, were saying, all right, we're going to do our own way almost on purpose to kind of ignore. I don't know, these mandates, I mean, I think Ike Perlmutter does plenty, but further up, I'm not sure. I'm with you. I don't think Disney really at times knows that exists. I think Time Warner has a better sense that things exist there. But sorry, Yul.
No, it's all right. No, I just don't have lips to look at. We need a Conan O'Brien thing. Anyhow, There was that Battle Wing situation where a DC exec or someone at AT&T actually had they edited that out, right? In the Black Label book.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's a case.
There's an executive higher up that
Mhm.
that did something different to the comic book, and I just wanted to bring that one up, remind everybody.
You're right.
So I do want to say thank you to KVI for the $10 super chat. That was very generous to support the channel that way, and I really appreciate it. We also have a $5 super chat from Kenneth Dowling. Sup, Wes? Hi, panel. Just coming back from the gym. Very well done. Get your swole on. Glad to catch the conversation. I like the new Do West. Party on. Well, thank you very much, and party on to you too, Kenneth. We really appreciate it. My son and I got tired of waiting for a haircut. There were still no barbers open about 3 days ago, so we had to take the plunge. So let's get back to
same boat. My wife attacked me with scissors a while back, so
it happens, man.
It's a mark of shame.
So Pele, you were out when we started this. And what do you think is worse, making Barbara Gordon no longer be Oracle, or not keeping Jeff Johns around to finish his vision for Rebirth?
Yeah, of course, Jeff Johns. But the whole thing, it's like overall for the DC universe and for comics in general, of course, it's Jeff Johns. But the whole thing with Barbara Gordon gripes my ass so much that I almost just want to say that, because it just, this great character, everybody likes this character. She's integral part with the Bat family and with a lot of other characters in general. She was a great drop in, into stories. She had a wonderful, story of her own, and just no, this is like fridging. This is terrible. This is problematic. We have to erase this. No, leave it alone. Bad things happen. Sometimes people turn bad things into good things. And this is one of those situations. So leave it alone. Stop trying to revise history, and just let the character live. It's a good character, but no, it does. It gripes my ass in terms that I've just pisses me off. But if I was more of a DC fan, I'd probably put that higher. But it's. Jeff Johns is just such stupidity that he was not kept on.
Well, I think he got like a new deal to be a producer on DC films, where he's probably making a lot more money.
Yeah, but they could have offered him more to.
I think that he's more valuable to them. This is an interesting one because the two choices are very, very different. I mean, one's an in-comic thing that you hear the visceral reaction from Pele, for many of us around as fans of comics. That one stings because it's something tangible we see where they had something and then they took it away, and that was just a dumb decision. With Jeff Johns, it's tougher because it's, I think I agree. I think that's the more business problem decision that was made, but it's hard to know what exactly would have changed. I mean, we're kind of speculating on potential. AT&T or Time Warner clearly thought that Jeff Johns can be more valuable to the overall brand and business by going to the movie side of the world, and probably more valuable for his pocketbook as well. And so, it's hard to then say, well, that was a bad decision, because it may wind up being far more impactful for DC as a total brand. But as a fan, I kind of missed what might have been in the comics.
Yeah, you read Doomsday Clock and you see a glimpse of what could have been. And it's like, oh my God, this could have been awesome. This could have been the event, not really event, but this could have been the turn in the comic industry that set DC up for the next several decades. And it just wasn't, because of internal personality conflicts. And
we also see the delays with Doomsday Clock and Shazam, and the whole thing could have been a hot mess because they couldn't get their stories done on time.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But, a lot of it, though, with Doomsday Clock was just sitting on the stories and sitting on books for months and months at a time. So.
All right. I think we've talked about that one. It's time to get Doc back in here. This is the number 4 one. This is from A&J 2099. Letting Chuck Austin loose on the X-Men. They never fully recovered. What do you think about that one, Doc?
Oh, Chuck Austin. Chuck Austin was the oh God. He was,
saved She-Ra.
He was that guy he was like that guy that would they'd just throw onto anything. And for some weird ass reason, his fetishes got really, really blown out of proportion during his run on X-Men. Jesus. You know,
we learned a lot.
Yes, we learned a lot. Like, he was a big fan of having a 28-year-old angel banging a 19-year-old page while her mom watched.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, Doc, let's not get into too much detail, all right?
Was he the one that added the... Was he the one that really added the sexual elements to the Cuckoos?
No. That was more
yeah.
That was Morrison.
Okay, because that got really kind of spicy.
Well, I mean, look, Chuck Austin, there's only a reason why he was on X-Men is because Joe Casey quit. And they didn't really have anybody else to stick there. Joe Casey was supposed to be doing Uncanny while Morrison was doing X-Men. And Joe, I guess, didn't like that his book isn't viewed as important enough, and he left. And you know what? They basically, Chuck Austin was like kind of their go-to fill-in guy at Marvel at that time. I don't know why. I don't know whose fetishes he was aware of in the front office that he met at a kink party or something, and kept giving him work. I don't know, but he kept getting work for a long time.
I think I can help you out, Doc. I think I look at it as it's kind of like the Shia LaBeouf theory, which is that the only reason he kept getting work is because he just really was a nice guy with all the people who were in charge. They really liked him a lot. They just kept throwing work his way, and that's all there was to it. Because for the life of us, I can figure out how that dude got to so many movies.
Yeah.
It's just...
You're absolutely right. I've asked this direct question to editors who were who know, and people within Marvel. He was very likable. He got along with everybody. He didn't create any waves. He worked for a reasonable rate.
He delivered on time.
And most importantly, he delivered on time. And a lot of people at that point at Marvel were not delivering remotely on time. And so there's a lot of people at Marvel and DC that have continued to get work because they can just meet a schedule.
Especially in the X office. I mean, because remember, Morrison was on New X-Men at the time, but it was the art teams were Quitely, who is not exactly quick, Ethan, who is incredibly slow, and what was it? Jimenez? Which one?
Jimenez, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm trying to remember which Jimenez. Phil. Okay. Yeah, and not exactly quick either. So you gotta, I mean, they're already basically trying to, they got the balls in the air with trying to keep the New X-Men art team on time. The last thing they needed was another, be concerned about a writer being late.
You are 100% right. I mean, and I think Brevert's even mentioned this at one point. It was exactly that. You got to put out X books, and you need one book that's going to be not one to worry about, that you're just going to be able to ship month in, month out. And Morrison has been slow, and you ran down the list quietly. Then Skyver and Jimenez are late. I mean, they have problems with meeting a schedule, and so it's like, well, okay, we need a book that's just going to be reliable. Chuck Austin's reliable. End of story. I mean,
I'm pretty sure that's why they brought in Bichello for at least the one.
Yep.
At least the one arc on New X-Men, just because they needed to, somebody that was guaranteed to be on time, and to buy themselves some time. Look, but his weird predilections on that book were, Interesting. Between the Annie thing, whose last name, I mean, who in the hell puts a character in there with a last name that literally no one on the planet can pronounce? I mean, it might as well have been like Mr. Mispelix or whatever the hell his
Mitzelplick.
Yeah. That nurse that was like Chuck's weird nurse thing. Yeah. I don't think anybody realized what they were getting into with Chuck, except for the fact that he delivered on time. And I mean, now I will blame him for one other thing. He was one of the first guys to get really, really big into the 3D modeling as an art tool. He did it on his what was it, Iron Man, or what was it, the U.S. War Machine Max title, when he wrote and technically drew it.
I like that title though. Fuck this thing. That's a guilty pleasure for me, but I'm with you. He ushered in a bad thing.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, his Chuck's Chuck was a dark period, but honestly, I would still take Chuck over Tom Taylor, over Tinny Howard, over Vita Ayala, over most over Bendis.
Even with the Draco storyline?
Yes, I would still take him over Bendis.
I remember
I mean, well, that's like choosing meningitis over cancer.
Yes.
But,
yes, one's curable.
Man, shots fired at Tevye Smokey. You got personal there, Doc. You know that he loves Tom Taylor's X-Men.
I don't care.
I just love that everybody was worried that Morrison was going to create a giant mess for writers going forward and continuity problems and things people would have to repair. And as it turned out, I think Chuck Austin with the Draco and some of these other things, he created the bigger continuity mess long term. It's you outdid Morrison, man. Well done.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it worked for him with Scott Lobdell. You know, the Marvel or the X-Men writer left, and they just hired the guy that was walking by the door, and they thought they would see if they could catch lightning in a bottle twice.
Yeah, I mean, it worked with Scotty whenever they hired him. You know, he just happened to be walking down the hall at the time.
Yeah, but Bob Harris was like the king in charge there, really, right?
Yeah.
You know, he was like, you're going to do what I tell you.
But I think
time for an event.
I think it was at the time. I think Ralph Macchio was the editor in the X Office. Whenever Morrison,
actually.
No, this is after
Mike, or was it Mike Martz?
No, I thought I can't remember now. All I know is Bob Harris was like very keen on how the X-Men were supposed to be run because the animated series was his baby, also, right? And he wanted like full control over everything.
Yeah. No, but this is definitely, if there are any aspiring creators, artists in particular who are watching this, having worked in the editorial department at Milestone, I used to have artists coming to me all the time and say, well, why do these guys get work when this guy's clearly better? It's like, bruh, I got to put out a book every 30 days. A book has got to go out every 30 days. And it's better. Sometimes it's better to be fast and good. Doesn't mean you can be terrible, but get fast, then get good. But every 30 days, something's got to go out. So I love Arthur Adams, but man, if you can't get it done on a 30-day schedule, I don't know what to tell you. Yep. Leaving money on the table.
Yeah. And you know, I guess Chuck was the guy that could get that done for the X Office at the time.
But it's important. I mean, look, as a guy who sold comics in the 90s and remembers the game of comics arrive, you know, meeting a schedule is pretty important to staying in business. But it's a shame that sometimes it comes at the cost of, you know, Pope Nightcrawler. So.
Yes, Pope Nightcrawler and his Red Dad.
So he was like the real Pope of like the Vatican.
You know, it's unclear.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's weird.
He was the X-Men chaplain. That's what it was.
Yeah. Okay.
He was a mutant chaplain, but then he had additional authority, and it was like maybe he was like the in you Pope, the new Pope. He's like,
Yeah.
It was confusing.
But maybe he'll be the Pope in Jonathan Hickman's X-Men. You know, he's starting his own religion.
That's exactly the problem that I think they're going with.
We need the Chuck Austin omnibus to come out soon. That'd be good.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's the one that's going to blow the sales numbers off.
I'm getting 2 of those.
Maybe after I'm done going through all these terrible Avengers issues, I'll just do the entire Chuck Austin run.
Ooh, that's good. There's a lot of material. I mean, he developed Angel's ability to bleed into people's wounds so that they would heal.
Yeah, which is an amazing thing to do while HIV was still running around.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Oh, good way to go.
Yeah.
Juggernaut and She-Hulk hooked up.
Yes.
Yep.
And
I did like the little fish boy. He was cute.
Yeah, he had the fish boy.
And then that Draco storyline. Oof.
Yeah, I felt like the fish boy was supposed to be Beak, but Morrison wouldn't let him use Beak.
I mean, who knows? That nurse story. Well, anyway, we could easily spend another hour on this topic. So you should probably cut us some stuff.
All right, so this next one is actually following up on something we talked a little bit out in depth on the first video, and it is talking about how Vertigo died. Wasn't Vertigo a Warner Brothers decision? Heard that a Warner Brother exec, Alan Horn, that came up in another comment, heard how much DC was paying Vertigo creators and ordered them to cut it out. And that's from Minardo. I'm going to mess this one up. Macareg. Do you remember that? Was that the case, Perch? I hadn't heard that one. Did DC or Warner Brothers actually come down and say you can't pay these guys so much? We have to take back our TV and movie rights for their original work?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the case. There's truth here. It was not it was basically they were looking to take more of these properties out. If the Alan Moore noise was growing at the time, I know there was some comments about, I think Preacher had a potential deal, and then it got pulled back from the table because of the rights and the amount of money that was going to go out and everything else. So I think some people were looking at the financing, and what we know is true is that there was a comment that came down, not sure if it was Alan Horn, but probably somebody at least from his office that said, you can't do this anymore, or you have to restructure this because it's making these properties impossible to take over. We can't have another Neil Gaiman. We can't have another situation here where the rights are all entangled. It wasn't all about money. Some of it was about ownership and creative control. In fact, I think, if my memory serves, it was a little bit more about that than the cash, because they were trying to make these properties into movies, and they were running into problems with the creators wanting authority over what was going to get done, and some of these creators were insane. So it was like, there were requests that came down and say you have to restructure this stuff.
From what I remember, the creators wanted executive producer status on projects, and it's like, oh no. No, we're not doing that. We'll pay. I do remember them saying, the money wasn't as much of an issue as it just was the creativity, the creative control, and wanting to have their names really high up on projects that they didn't have any involvement in other than just in creating the character.
And it was a case where I think Hollywood, and I remember this is a true statement that came out, that there was confusion over. With books, you typically have an author and maybe an artist, but generally an author that you have to deal with. And in comics, it's suddenly this collection of maybe 2, 3, or more people that you have to kind of figure out and manage around when you're moving these things and getting the rights put together. So it was a case where they didn't know what to do with it, and that statement came down to kind of trim it. So,
is that why they canceled Hellblazer also during that time? Because it was like the longest running comic book going, other than like Uncanny X-Men, and then they ended that also.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think that was because they wanted to bring John Constantine into the more traditional DCU.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
and they didn't want it to be titled Hellblazer.
And if they could get rid of the Vertigo line also that way, that'd be good. I wonder if the contracts changed a little bit. Like if you move him over to the DC proper, then he's not exactly this character. Although there was, Vertigo was like DC continuity. Swamp Thing had, the Justice League in it, and all the Magic characters, Zatanna and whatnot. Sandman had Earth 2 characters in it, and some of those other things also. So I was wondering, like, if they moved it over to DC, just the superhero division, is this Hellblazer no longer the one that was created by Moore and I don't know, Totalbin or something like that?
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
It was the same. Yeah, he was the same. It was just that he was written in a different style. He wasn't nearly as dark.
Yep.
But for the rights, DC was playing that. This was a confined universe, a specific take. So this is that creator's take on the character, and now they're over here, and it's a different take. So therefore, the royalties don't necessarily need to be paid. And this was an era where DC was playing a lot of shenanigans with cash.
They were getting a lot of Marvel '90s guys in. Like, wasn't Harris coming over, or I forget. Him, Hank Canals, which is a Jim Lee guy. He was running Vertigo, and as you're watching him run Vertigo, that was like the first time that they were actually like trying to destroy it, as opposed to the most recent one. Again, canceling titles and reverting characters back to DC proper.
Well, Hank was he's a Jim guy, but he's also a Rob Liefeld guy. He's just an Image guy,
right?
Because he was one of the early Image guys that worked at Image, that wasn't a
he scripted the first Youngblood and everything.
Yeah, and he also did the design for the Image logo. He was the guy that designed the logo. But he ran Image for a very long time. But he wasn't a creative. For the most part, and he was obviously never a partner, but which is really weird because him being at Vertigo would have been kind of the perfect thing for them, because it was kind of Vertigo was kind of DC's Image. It should have been, at least.
Well, he was more, but he was there in the superhero phase of Image, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like the Image of today feels more like Vertigo. Than even Vertigo did recently. Vertigo, they lost their way. They had they had their second life when they started bringing like crime comics, like 100 Bullets and Scalped and things like that. They kind of went away from like most of the spooky horror stuff for a while, like how they set up with like Shade too. And it was, and only that. And again, going back to Hellblazer. That was the only one that like kind of kept continuing what originally Vertigo was all about. So when they canceled I think that was like a major thing. I mean, at least for customers that would come in the store, and I sold Hellblazer quite well. That was a sticking point. They were very upset.
I think with the death of, or not the death, but the ending of Sandman, they saw Vertigo as kind of being rudderless. And because Sandman was massive, even all the way up to the last issue. I remember going to the largest LCS in the area. It's before I ever owned a shop. Largest LCS in the area, and they had a huge, going away party for the Sandman series, and hundreds of people, and for pretty small comics community. And it was much beloved, and I think that DC saw it as kind of like a rudderless property after that. So, but anyway, we got a super chat here. Let's.
We did. Wes is me for
big
some
one.
Kenneth
Dowling.
Thank you, Kenneth.
And Kenneth had a $20 super chat. For me, I think the bad decision was putting Miles Morales into the main Marvel universe. I feel that character needs to be in his own world and develop his own identity away from Peter Parker. He just looks like a sidekick.
Yeah,
exactly. Yep. He fit he's one of those characters. He's a great character that they didn't know what to do with after the Ultimate Universe went.
That's
but
right.
They were already doing they had already done a Spider-Man or Spider-Man miniseries before the Secret Wars, didn't they?
They did.
And what's always funny is that
well.
that it did sell well, and they even did a second one. But the amusing thing that I always come back to, and this kind of ended up being very prescient on Marvel's part. The one thing that they always said was, if we ever have to cross over the Marvel universe with the Ultimate Universe, we're out of ideas.
I think Bendis said that, right?
No, that was Joe Quesada.
Oh, damn. I thought it was.
3 years later?
It's kind of proven that Marvel ran entirely out of ideas because that's what they had to do. And ever since then, they haven't really had any good ideas.
No,
there were certain characters that were in the Ultimate Universe that they just desperately wanted to save, but they didn't want to save the whole of the universe. So it was like, oh crap.
Joe gets incredibly salty if you remind him of that quote, by the way. If you ever want to piss him off in a con, you just remind him of that. He gets super, super pissy. So does Tom Brevoort, for that matter. But I think, remember our very first...
He didn't read any comics, so...
Well, sure. What would he know anyway? For the very first question, I think the Ultimate Universe is another example of comic companies trying to fix something that wasn't necessarily broken.
Thank you.
It had an audience. It had a fan group, even though it wasn't at its height of popularity. The whole Ultimatum and the Twincest and all that kind of stuff wasn't its shining moment. But still, there were people who came in and bought those books at much higher quantities than what Marvel sells today. But they were just hot to get, like, we've got to get rid of it. We've got to clean it up. We can't, too confusing to have a Marvel universe and Ultimate Universe. We got to fix this. This was not a problem that needed solved. And they took a lot of value off the table. I think Miles Morales suffered. I think a lot of their characters, they took future business away from them by needing to clean up that universe, which they didn't need to do.
Remember when the fear was... Oh, I'm sorry. You guys go.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, remember when the fear was that the Ultimate Universe would take over the 616 universe?
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, this can't happen. Don't worry.
No, but that was the thing, was that some of the creators, I forget which one who said at the time, I think about this before, it said that, the great thing about the Ultimate Universe was that they were selling us the same thing twice.
Yeah.
And for me as a fan, I was like, oh, okay, look, I mean, that was like a little bit insulting. But I'm like, I always thought Ultimate Universe, like you said, it was trying to fix a problem that didn't have a solution. Because my only thing with Ultimate Universe was that if you're trying to introduce this to a group of people who don't know these characters, then please don't introduce them to a group of people who don't know these characters. Sell them in a Walmart, sell them in a GameStop or whatever. But basically telling me I'm buying the same thing twice. So I honestly thought the Ultimate Universe was actually the expression of the fact that they ran out of ideas to begin with. Much less if they merged the two universes. It was just, I always found the Ultimate Universe to just be a slap in the face. It's like, I'm not paying, I don't know what the price was back then, $6 for basically a retread, or $3 for a retread, a story that I read before. And, I thought the Ultimate Universe, if I'm going to be real naughty about this, was Chuck Austin before Chuck Austin, but that's just me. So anyway, with maybe the exception of the Ultimates, but at a certain point,
it was supposed to be the edgy version of modern retelling. That was all it really was. I mean, it was an edgy modern retelling. That's all it really came down to. And they did it with Ultimates. They did it with Ultimate X-Men. They did it with Ultimate Fantastic Four. They did it with Ultimate Spider-Man. It was just the edgy version. And now, why was that? Because they went over and basically poached all of the talent away from Wildstorm, who was doing edgy modern comics at the time, and said, rewrite our core characters with that edgy, modern sensibility to it. That was it.
So is Heroes Reborn done right?
One of my best.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my best friends was like, this feels to me like they just want to tell stories with the traditional characters, but be able to use bad words, be able to use 4-letter words, and it's like,
well, there was some updating to it also.
Yeah,
I mean,
they wanted it accessible for fans.
But I mean, I had a lot of young readers that were really upset that Peter Parker died. And is he going to really die? I'm like, not the real Peter Parker. But for those people, Ultimate Peter Parker was the real Peter Parker. And so, you know, you got to it kind of worked to some degree. You know, it did get young readers into it. And I'm old, so you kind of forget that.
But you guys don't think that Ultimate Spider-Man was a little bit different in tone than the other books? Because Ultimate Spider-Man just felt like, like it kind of felt like the Stan Lee Ditko stuff, but just more updated for the modern thing, as opposed to Ultimate X-Men and even Ultimates, which just seemed like, if I was going to write the most jacked up version of Captain America I could think of, that's what I'm going to do here right now.
It's just decompressed stories that we've already read in one issue from, like you said, Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. And and the other thing is, like, a TV show these days. Can I just have a new TV show that doesn't have an entire arc? You know, just one episode, please. Does it have to always be a sitcom to make that happen? And that's what, you know, Norman Osborn is the person that not only created Spider-Man or Peter Parker Spider-Man, he also pretty much created Miles Morales Spider-Man also. That same day, 2 Spider-Mans were created, you know, basically. And it's like, wow, this whole super 150 issue arc. And I just want those really good stories, please.
I do want to say thank you very much for Kenneth Dowling for the $20 super chat. Very generous of you, and you certainly got some great conversation and debate started while I was off taking a little break. So did we have anything else to say about Vertigo and why it kind of disintegrated and basically became Image Comics? That's kind of where everything that would have been Vertigo went to Image and Dark Horse and publishers like that.
No.
All right. Let's move on to Perlmutter. I know you guys want to talk about him, and this is from KVI, who I believe is still in the chat right now. Ike Perlmutter's removing X-Men in the comics and shoehorning Inhumans solely because they didn't own the movie rights. This is just plain stupidity. Like, this is basically indefensible that you would downplay one of the tent poles of Marvel Comics just because you're butthurt that you sold off the movie rights for probably way cheaper than you should have, and didn't get them back.
Well, they didn't sell them for way cheaper than they should have, because that was what they could get for them at the time.
Right.
Remember,
the seller's remorse is what you're telling me.
You had seller's remorse. That's it. I mean,
I feel that in the comic store all the time.
Yeah, I mean, hell, there's a lot of things that I've sold over the years that I really regret, and I definitely should have held on to longer. I dumped a part of my collection a couple of years ago, dumped about 3,000 books, and in there I know I got like first appearance of Damian Wayne, a bunch of other, or decent DC modern stuff that has a lot of value these days. But no, they're in this. I don't sit there and like refuse to buy new shit, or because I screwed up once and I don't, hate the guy that bought it off me. And
you'll never read Damian Wayne again because you don't have that comic anymore.
Yeah. I'm you know what? If I remembered what store it was that was driving around buying them up and coming through my area whenever I sold them, I wouldn't not shop at his store just because I made a dumb decision to sell shit. And that's what it seems like Ike was doing. Now, Ike has never, this is the problem that you get with a lot of non-comics people making comics decisions. They never understand, and even a lot of the people that are in comics, they never understand from a reader perspective and a buyer perspective, what is it about certain things that speak to the reader and get into, like, what are they tapping into? What is the draw of it? And they think, well, this thing, is close enough to this thing, so why isn't it the same? It's like them trying to figure out why Hyperion isn't as popular as Superman. Because he's not fucking Superman. It's the same thing. And they've never quite, you have this problem in comics where they never quite they're never willing to sit there and objectively look at themselves in the mirror.
Why isn't Captain Marvel more popular than Captain America?
Exactly. She's got our company name. Yeah, she's stronger and better and more whatever, and she's got our company name in her name. But Captain America is still more popular. Wolverine's still more popular, and he's not a captain of anything.
Oh man, they talk about squashing a character too, Wolverine.
Yeah, but
they did him dirty.
They do characters dirty because they think that if they shove somebody that is popular off the screen, it's going to make more room for the things that they want to be popular. And the same way that I told indie comics about the concept of, well, don't sit here, having a party because the big publishers are going down. Nobody else can fail their way into your success. Neither can pushing popular things off of the stage, thinking that you're going to quote unquote make room. It's this bad logic. And the publisher, Ike tried to do it. It didn't work. They've tried to do it with a bunch of other things too. It just doesn't.
Fantastic Four.
Yes.
We're talking about their first family, right? Fantastic Four, and to make the Inhumans and kind of keep the Fantastic Four around, they had Medusa getting together with Johnny Storm. And Reed and Sue are out, flinging universes around and stuff like that, off screen. And you have the Thing doing his. I don't remember what he was doing, but yeah, Johnny Storm was involved.
He was with the Guardians.
Oh yeah, he was with the Guardians. Did anybody like any of that Inhuman stuff that was going on during this time?
None of that stuff.
No.
Yeah. Not one thing. I kind of, if I had to like something, it was the character that Sewell obviously liked to write, that detective character.
Yeah, the cop.
That might be the only thing I liked.
That was the only redeeming part of that entire Inhumans thing. The old man that didn't want to have an Inhumans name.
Right.
Yeah. But now keep in mind, so we all like that character. I do too. What was that character's name? Anyone?
Oh, I don't know.
Frank McGee.
Oh, very good.
Oh, okay.
Good job. Most people, I've done this test with people before. They're like, "Oh, I like that character." I'm like, "Cool. What was his name?" Uh-oh. And but that sums up kind of the Inhumans. The interesting thing about this, I'm not saying this just to be contrarian, but from our earlier conversation about the problem that comic books does not have enough businessmen or women or whatever running it, people who care about the business. Here we're looking at kind of the opposite side of the coin, where Perlmutter, despite what Bleeding Cool and others have said, I don't believe he's sitting in his office just like, aha, screw Fox for weird emotional reasons. He is looking at it, as I think Doc said, without the knowledge of comics. He's looking at it from a perspective of managing a financial portfolio. And he's like, if I make more money off this property than that property, I'm going to push the one that I'm making the money off of. It's a very much a numbers decision. It's a dumb one.
I have to disagree with that because I'm going to kind of process it a bit because I'm sorry, it felt exactly like that's what Perlmutter was doing. Because I was going to ask, does anybody remember when 20th Century Fox said, "Oh, how dare you, Ike? How dare you?" I mean, it's like, how do you? And now, to your point, Purge. Yeah, he doesn't know enough about comics to realize there was no way on God's green earth that the Inhumans were going to be a substitute for literally one of the biggest franchises in modern comic history. But this, I don't know how many of you guys watch the wrestling podcast, Something to Wrestle With. So Bruce Pritchard talks about this all the time. When fans say, "Oh, you put the polka dots on Dusty Rhodes to bury him," he's like, "Why would we bury a character that we've invested all this time and money into just to send him out there and just lose money?" To me, this felt like exactly that. It was just like we're gonna shoot our own property in the foot because Fox owns properties. Fox owns the film rights to it. We're mad about the decision. You talk about the first family in comics and one of the most popular franchises in the industry, and they basically destroyed them. And Fox would, and it didn't change one thing until Disney bought Fox out.
Yep.
For me, I thought it was totally. He was sitting up there like, "Oh, they're not going to renegotiate with me, so I'm going to bury the characters that don't." No, I I think it was personal.
But I think so. I'm not in disagreement with you. I just think it was personal, kind of in a different way. I think Perlmutter looked at this through a lens of, I want to make money for me, and if my competitor is Fox and they're using one of my properties and not giving me the money for it, then I'm going to hurt them. That's where the personal thing came in. I don't believe it's Perlmutter saying, screw the comic. I mean, in many cases, I don't even think Perlmutter really was cognizant to the comics that were being published in some cases. I think it was very much a financial decision. And I bring that up because we were saying earlier, and I still maintain, you do need more people who are trying to making money, managing a portfolio, and that's their primary goal. I think that's wise, and there needs to be more of that. But this is an example of maybe the extreme in the other direction. You get somebody who has no feelings for the comics, the history, the continuity, and actually, is in touch with the fans and what they actually want. You may get stuff like this.
Yeah, but the thing was that this supposedly, allegedly, apparently was Perlmutter's strategy to begin with. The whole point was to license merchandise to properties out through stuff like the movies to build the awareness, and then basically build up the business of the other sectors of history, such as comics, licenses. Mm-hmm. It just seemed like he forgot his own deal. He forgot what his own business strategy was.
I think you're right. I think it's kind of, again, what we talked about earlier with Alan Moore. I think the deal was made. That was a deal he liked. And he's like, oh, wait a minute. They're making more money off this deal than I want them to, which is a classic Disney thing as well. This has happened many times outside of Marvel. This is Disney, where they make a deal and suddenly somebody makes it successful. And they're like, all right, now we gotta claw the rights back because you're using our character. It's like, hey, but you made that deal. Anyway, it's an interesting way of this whole thing is fascinating, I think, because you do see, we've seen the fans running a comic company, and we've seen a hardcore businessman running a comics company, and where it can go wrong in both places.
That's true.
So real quick, I do want to say thank you very much to Fatal J for supporting the channel, $5 super chat, and I hope you are enjoying the conversation here. This is what I try to bring here. So when you see people or hear people say no one wants to just talk about comics, tell them you're wrong, sir. Right here on Thinking Critical, that's really all we talk about.
Hey, I'll throw one other. I got a chance to visit the Marvel offices 5 years ago, and Bleeding Cool was running a story that Ike Perlmutter personally asked for all the pictures of the X-Men and Fantastic Four be taken off the walls and all the rest. And while it is true in the main lobbies and the main areas, the pictures on the wall were what they were currently promoting. You went into those offices, there was Kirby, there was Fantastic Four. It did not get removed from, that was a complete made-up story. I can say, in fact, I've even got some pictures at some point I could post of me like standing in front of Kirby. I know, who knew? But it is... There are parts of this story, it's interesting as we react to it, are over dramatized because we've been fed maybe some exaggerated stories.
Yeah.
All right, so you guys done talking about Ike Perlmutter? There's nothing more you want to say about him destroying X-Men? Doc, I'm shocked.
Oh, wait, Doc's not here.
Oh, Doc's not here. That's why he's not chiming in. All right, let's go on to the next topic. All right, the next one is from Evandro Antonio Cruz. He is in the chat. He just showed up a few minutes ago. The dark and edgy trend in the DC universe, Crisis on Infinite Earths, Hal Jordan becomes Parallax, New 52, Heroes in Crisis, Bendis and Superman. I couldn't agree with this one more, Evandro. The DC going away from the hopeful universe with Superman at the forefront and kind of going more to Batman and going the edgy dark route, I think has completely destroyed the universe and has kind of killed the flavor of DC Comics. What do you think about that one, Javane?
Well, yeah, this one for me is personal because it led to the naughty 90s where it was the best of times and yet it was the worst of times. And my take has always been is that you had Alan Moore had a very specific vision for what he wanted to do with Watchmen. Frank Miller had a very specific vision for what he wanted to do with the Dark Knight Returns. And everybody who came after them, whether it was because they just wanted to jump on the money train or they just didn't have any craft or skill, drew all the wrong lessons from those two successes. Absolutely the wrong lessons. It's one thing to say, I want to give Batman his balls back, and then to say, I'm going to turn Speedy into a date rapist. It just culminated for me with Identity Crisis or whatever it was. But it was just, if you don't understand, when you look at what Alan Moore did with Watchmen, I think too many people said, well, he doesn't like superheroes, and superheroes are corny, or
Not
superheroes on with the time. But then when you contrast that with what he did with whatever happened to Superman, or whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow, it's like he likes superheroes. It's just Watchmen was just a particular take on a genre he did. It wasn't like a rallying cry to like, this is what all superhero comics should be like. And so you're right. This one for me, other than, and I don't know if we can get to this, Marvel Buying Heroes World. This was like editorial in terms of the sensibility of comics. I have had people tell me they don't like the sensibility of comics these days, and I hold the dark and the grim and gritty era totally responsible for that. It just everyone missed the point. They missed the point with this one. Yeah, ruined the industry for about a good 10, 15 years.
I can't agree more. I think you're absolutely on target. It's and it was people who I think you hit it with. There's people who can write dark and edgy just fine, and they make good stories. But you don't bring bad writers to the table and try and mimic something they do not know how to do, and they did not.
And then it went hand in hand with the way that they wanted to pitch the DCEU in the movies, just dark and gritty, and and it just. And that's where they missed the mark in the movies as well. There's no heart. There's no humor, no mirth.
There you go, Taylor.
And it was just like, oh, come on. The Dark Knight trilogy was good, but not every movie can be like that. You've got to have, and they've rectified that. Shazam to some degree with Shazam and others, which I thought was extremely refreshing. But Wonder Woman to a degree. There was hope. There was a brightness to it, and they're still trying to shake that off. So
it's the same thing, though. It's Frank Miller and Alan Moore can pull it off because they're good at what they do and they know how to write that genre. Christopher Nolan can pull it off because he knows what he's doing and he can direct that genre. And so it's, if you hire people who are talented, then dark and edgy can work just fine. You just got to hire people who know what they're doing, and they also can't come into a comic line that has a ongoing story. I mean, comics will go on forever. So if you're going to have somebody come in and do a really hard, dark and edgy turn, you're going to need to have a plan after that. Unless you're hoping that Grant Morrison's just going to write your comic forever, you're going to need to understand, like, when his time is done, are you continuing with dark and edgy? Do you have the next Grant Morrison lined up, or are you going to shift the tone back and do somebody? I mean, you got to think these things through. You can't just say, hey, let's bring in Chuck Austin and make it dark and edgy.
So I do want to say
an interesting take. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Perch, hear me out on this one. So I think one of the things that Didio really missed the mark on when he was at DC is that he kept trying to recreate the magic that was Watchmen and Dark Knight's Return without really understanding what that magic was. Deconstruction wasn't the magic. That's what they used to do something brand new with the character that no one had seen, that was exciting and made it fresh. So rehashing the same thing that they used to make it fresh, it's no longer fresh anymore. And the people that are doing the rehashing aren't up to snuff. So you can see it for all its faults and why it falls flat in comparison to the Watchmen or Dark Knight's Return. So instead of wasting all their time and resources trying to recreate that magic, they should have been trying to do the next thing that's the Dark Knight's Return that isn't deconstruction, but the next evolution in writing or storytelling in comics. And I think that's where they really missed the mark.
I agree.
Here's what I was going to say for a second, real quick. That as far as dark and edgy is concerned, you have people that can do dark and edgy, like Perce said, but there's not a hopelessness to it. There's not a pointlessness to it. And when you have something like, I'm going to go back again, Tom Taylor, Deceased. There's nothing darker and edgier right now from the big two than that. It's Elseworlds, but it is dark, it's edgy, it's bleak sometimes, but it's not hopeless. And it's not just this, horrible slog to go through. It's like, wow, that's incredible. That's amazing. And there is there's a slim hope, but there is hope. And, they just got into that whole thing, I think, just being dark and edgy for the sake of it instead of just having an actual direction for it. And
Yeah, it's. I think.
Hold on, guys. We got 3 super chats we got to get through. So I do want to say thank you very much to Wellesley #1 for the $9.99 super chat. Must listen on Saturday's fun show. Thank you very much. This is appointment viewing. We are here every Saturday at what is it? It's 9. Or is it 10 p.m. or 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time? 10 p.m. my time right now because of daylight savings. Thank you very much for supporting the channel, Wellesley. Very #1. Very generous of you. The next one is from Ryan Wilson, $19.99 super chat. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. People think writing mature content means dark, blood, cussing, and sex. It doesn't need to be. It should be something adults can relate to. It should be something to make adults think. Now we're talking here, Yule. What do you think about that? Just because it has sex or cursing doesn't make an adult. What making people think or relating to the story with adult themes is more like what it's all about.
Oh yeah, sure. Cursing. Ugh. Going back to the 90s, it's funny. All right, so there's the people that try and emulate those guys and fail to do so. And then what else did we get? What else was dark and edgy? Having big guns and anti-heroes and people that would curse also. And in Image, what would happen? They would use the wingdings, so you don't know what they were really saying. These days, you can put anything in, pretty much. Mm-hmm. And it's edgy. Oh, they put an F word where you need it. It actually sounds very clunky. And as I get older, I feel like, although I personally curse at the right times, when I'm reading it in comics, it doesn't feel like the right time, or even on Twitter. It always seems so forced. That's what a lot of people say. The cursing's forced. And yeah, dark. Oh, and another thing, the comics code went out, and so we could get red blood on covers. Woo, red blood, right? No big deal. But that was a thing that we all pretty much grew up having to read. It was these restrictions, and from restrictions, sometimes you get better storytelling. Like, oh, you can't look. Jean Grey had to die, right? She had to die, and that was because there was a rule, onerous or not, that Marvel staff had to follow. And it's kind of like that, I need the Jim Shooter saying I need sales or else the title's going to get canceled, and all that other stuff is something that actually helps out. And when we've erased it altogether and you can do anything, it's not even dark and edgy anymore. It's just commonplace, and it's not. Yeah, it should be a strong story, not just these elements that you think that make it what it is. There you go.
So that's why I like what you said about
having
that.
A potty mouth doesn't mean that you're edgy.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but that's what I said about it becoming common. That's okay, about being commonplace, because before that, who did we have? We basically had, for the most part, Frank Castle and Wolverine, who basically represented that anti. And the reason why those characters became so popular is because in their own ways they were unique in regards to the other heroes of the Marvel Universe. But when you make everybody Frank Castle and Wolverine, it's like it's not special anymore. It's like now it's just like, see, Grim and Gritty was just like, it was the absence of heroism. It's like nobody's. I don't come here for that. It's like it's almost the absence of escapism. I want to come. I get enough of that in the real world, where there's basically like what is it that Norm said from Cheers? It's like it's a dog eat dog world, and I'm wearing biscuit underwear. I like to walk into some place where I'm not wearing biscuit underwear. And the simple fact of the matter is that when you take the comics world, where at least there's this thing of like hope, and that's why I like Pele say there's hope, there's heroism, where sometimes the good guys actually win. But to make it to where everything is just doom and gloom and there's just, Spider-Man's not cracking jokes. I don't know. You basically took two characters who had a certain tone, who had a nice fit in the Marvel Universe, and you tried to make everybody that. It doesn't work. I don't need Clark Kent to be snapping Zod's neck. I just don't. That's just me. I don't.
So I do want to say thank you very much to Ryan Wilson. A very generous support for the channel. Very much appreciated. Now we do have one more super chat from Kenneth Dowling, $20 super chat. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Recently bought a hardcover trade paperback of Batman Tales of the Demon, a collection of classic stories where Batman fights Ra's al Ghul, all written by Denny O'Neil. Great stuff. Ra's is my top 5 favorite Batman villains. Gosh damn it. Pele, what do you say about that? Is Ra's al Ghul in the top 5 Batman villains of all time?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely, definitely. As far as being a more cerebral villain, being a more a test of his capacity, as being maybe not the world's greatest detective, but as far as his full abilities, physical as well as mental. He's a great villain, really great villain. I mean, I'm not a huge DC guy, but yeah, definitely I'd put him in top 3.
So, Gervain, what would you say about Denny O'Neil as a Batman writer? Is he in the top 5 Batman writers as well?
Oh yeah, I give it to him for nothing else than from, I believe it was Legends of the Dark Knight Venom, which is that was probably, even by his own admission, about his 3rd attempt to do like a drug abuse story in superhero form. And Venom is like, I don't hear people really talk about it much these days, but it's just a really underrated story where you take Batman, you turn him basically to a drug addict. That's right, but you don't lose the fact that he's Batman. See, it's like, that's the kind of stories that we're talking about, where it's like, it gets to a point, now I'm spoiling it here, so if you don't want to hear this part, run away. But David gets to a point where he's almost about to kill his best friend just to get a fix. It's like, I think sometimes, I think Perch was bringing this up before. I think it's come up in a conversation before. I think it's like kind of like when you're in wrestling, they tell you, oh, there's like 10 matches you should watch to really learn storytelling. And I think sometimes with creators now, there should be like a recommended list of certain stories you should read just to say, this is what storytelling is across, whatever different tone or whatever it is. But like Denny O'Neil, he had something to say about Batman, and he said it well. I mean, I don't know how much of input he had into Nightfall, which I'm not a big fan of, but I thought that Venom by far showed how well he understood that character and how much his craft had improved over the years. Where you could tell a story like that, which, in one sense, if you told that story now, if you told that story at a certain time, people are like, "Oh, you're ruining Batman," but it didn't ruin Batman. It made you see and enhance what we loved about Batman so much that he could have that human failing, but still have that hero's journey and overcome it anyway. So if you haven't read Legends of the Dark Knight, that Venom storyline, yeah, you need to check that out. It was a great story. One of the better stories.
I gotta ask you. Denny O'Neil is coming back. He's writing a part of the story in the Green Lantern 80th anniversary special. How excited are you for that one?
I'm super excited. I actually, I know some people don't enjoy it as much, but I think they're wrong. But the Hard Traveling Heroes is one of my favorite anythings I've ever read in comic books. It's great how even the super chats are like leading into what we're talking about. There's your adult comic book. No cursing, no murder, implication and threat and action, everything you want from a comic book. And, and it's political, but you at least get opposing views when it comes to that, or, as best as one person and Neil Adams can do. And man, anything he does Green Lantern, I'm down. I'm a big Denny O'Neil fan. I grew up on The Question, one of my favorite series all time. Sure.
Dave Cowens?
Dennis Cowan. He's just another great artist. I mean, one of the only reasons why I even picked up Hardware initially was because he did that. And, Question, and I'm reading Steel that he did. I love Dennis Cowan a lot. And just those two on that same book is so great. And Denny O'Neil, one of my favorites. I have a question for you guys, though. And Gervais.
Before we do that,
sorry.
We got another one. I apologize.
Oh, no, it's okay. I shouldn't even ask it then.
Good, Alec. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Very generous of you, and I really appreciate it. And we do have one more super chat from the best name in comic books YouTube, Albino Thunderbuns, bringing the heat with a $10 super chat. Moore and Miller said they wrote dark stories to show what the world would be like without traditional superheroes, and they were shocked that their Elseworld takes were imitated by mainstream comics. I've definitely heard that one before, Perch, that actually Alan Moore said he regrets that he basically ruined superheroes with Watchmen.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. But I think he was responding to what we talked about earlier. Is that he can do a take on things and put something out, and then along comes dozens of people trying to imitate it or replicate it, and they don't understand that. And I think Jermaine started. I was going to answer you earlier. This goes back now a ways, but these things tend to work once, work twice. You can't have, I think you'll say, you can't have every character be the Punisher. You can have the Punisher, you can have maybe one more, but eventually you stretch that and stretch that. What makes them popular is because they're unique. And what made what Mars work popular is because it was unique at the time. The answer is not, hey, let's clone this 800 times. The answer is let's figure out the next thing that's going to be unique and popular and then build from that. But that takes a lot more work. It's a lot more risky. And this business, for all the conversation about how it's a creative people and all the rest, in more cases than not, it's people kind of regurgitating what's been done before, often, not the best. And that's why you do see these eras come through of something spikes in popularity, and then suddenly it's the Clone Wars for the next 10 years until somebody else comes up with a good idea. And that's fortunately our industry.
Yeah, it's crazy also what Miller was able to do. When you think about Batman or The Dark Knight Returns and how classic that's seminal, but I would say his deconstruction of Daredevil is even better. I think it's still the best Daredevil run that you'll ever read in your life. And basically, they've been imitating that story arc for the last 20, 25 years in Daredevil. They just keep redoing that one story where he gets taken down to nothing and he has to build himself back up. It's like the only thing they can do with the character anymore.
Yeah, but that's because literally these creators, they don't understand what Miller and Moore are doing. It's what any good creative person does. They kind of go outside of comics and find something and bring it in that enhances the medium, the storytelling. So when you look at, if you listen to Miller talk about Daredevil, the reason why that has such a passion taken and resounds so well, even though this isn't necessarily going on in the industry, that's his love letter to Will Eisner's spirit. That's what he's doing the whole time. If you look at it, Elektra is his, I think it was Sans Serif. He had a very real personal vision for himself of what he was trying to do in Daredevil. And when you read Moore's book where he talks about writing, and it's like, and he says it himself. He doesn't see himself as this visionary. He's doing very elemental things in terms of storytelling, but it's just that he's expanding his knowledge base beyond just what you find in comics. He's going to other literary sources. He's going to other mediums. He's reading a newspaper article over here and there, and he's bringing that into the comics world to enhance the storytelling. 90% of the creators are like, well, I read I don't know, Dan Slott's Spider-Man, and I'm just going to regurgitate that, but throw a bunch of different characters on top of it. And they just don't get it. The whole point is that you got to kind of expand your palette. You got to, go to an art exhibit, go watch a Kurosawa film, do that, see what they're doing well, and then bring it into the medium, and then you'll get something like a Miller or more. But but our industry is very trend driven. If somebody does a guerrilla comic and it does well, then there's gonna be 50 guerrilla comics after that. It's just nobody understands what's bringing them to the dance or why they're successful at the dance. Yeah.
And it's always.
I do
want
to
say. Oh, go ahead.
Say thank you very much to Albino Thunderbuns for the $10 super chat. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. That was very generous of you. I'm sorry, Yul. I kind of cut you off earlier. Did you remember your comment?
So guys, if Watchmen is this thing that you should not necessarily take and continue as a writer, if you can't do it well. My question to you as fans that come into the store and start with Watchmen. And us as store owners, some of us, maybe we should hold them off, and have them read other stuff before they get there. I know it's kind of gatekeeping, also, but
but to that point, because I was a jazz fan, and there were when I was working at a video store, and as the guys were introducing me jazz, I would ask them, well, Coltrane, what should I listen to? John Coltrane? Should I do Love Supreme? He's like, no. Don't do Love Supreme. He would say, start with these here first, and then work through these, and by the time you get to Love Supreme, then you'll be able to appreciate it. So I agree. I don't think people should lead people off with Crisis on Infinite Earths. I was like, that's like the worst thing you could possibly do to a new comics fan and say, you know what, read Crisis on Infinite Earths. Are you kidding? Come on, Anthro? No. I think I wouldn't call it so much as gatekeeping, maybe because I think you're actually doing a person a service by kind of saying, hey, here's a book, check this out, and get them used to the hobby. And then at some point, they'll be ready to appreciate Crisis on Infinite Earths, which even I would say at this point is just somewhat dated as the book itself. Because if you really if you really weren't a DC fan before '85, it just doesn't have the same resonance as some other stuff. So yeah,
we like trying to come in and reading Saga the Swamp Thing as your very first comic book. That's brilliant, but you're not ready for that yet. You gotta get really used to the medium first and some of the styles and tropes before you get in that. It's like master level studies right there.
Yeah. Now, what I would say, if you were going to introduce go ahead.
Oh no, just you got to start them with Secret Empire and then let them build up too.
Oh yeah. There you go.
One more day, you don't know Spider-Man.
But what I would tell people, if you really were going to introduce, especially kids, and I would even say even some adults to comics and film, because it goes back to what you were saying, like having like this kind of one and done. I always recommend the Batman Adventures, that Kelly Puckett, Mike Perlmutter run. That to me is like the epitome of what like the introductory comic should be. It's like you get one story, you got a great character, you have a great storyline in between, even some great subplots. That whole Batman Adventures run, the DC comic based on an anime series, that's what I guess, for lack of a better word, mainstream comics should be. The ones that should be in a Dollar Tree or something like that. If you read it once, you're good. If you want to go back for some more, you get another one. It's not 50 story arcs going on at the same time. But those books were just so simple, so classic, and so just what comics should be at like the highest level. I recommend that to anybody. That's what you should give to somebody if you're starting them off on comics.
I've sold a lot of like to first time customers. They come up with like Watchmen and Killing Joke all at the same time. Maybe a V for Vendetta in addition, and it's like, you're. I like the sale and I appreciate, good stuff, but that's 3 rough ones right there.
So OR Comics is asking, my nephew is getting into Spider-Man. What's a good, wholesome Spider-Man arc I can get him on a trade or something as an introductory Spider-Man story?
All right. They do a Marvel action from IDW. You can get the Spider-Man that way. The only thing I think that they failed on those books is that they made them continuing issues, so like an entire storyline. And they should have done one-shot stories like those Batman adventure books. And then, of course, you got your epic collections of Stanley, Steve Ditko, Romita stuff. Those are all great, and I still think that kids like them. Great. Or Venom,
I think if you started with the Ultimate Universe Spider-Man for the first, there's a good one here. I mean, before they kill him off, you got a good 100 issues, I think, that are really solid, kind of classic Spider-Man. I would go. That would be an easy one to get. And a lot of kids to get that cheap.
Clone Saga, anybody?
Oh,
don't rush into that one.
No. Spider-Man.
Somebody
on Spider-Man.
You need
I'd
to read the Ultimate
100
Spider-Man before you get to the Clone Saga. You got to work your way.
Start at 100.
Like Alan Moore.
Start people at 100.
Okay. Yeah, those are good. I mean, you don't like have all of the Gwen Stacy, but there's a lot of it there.
Well, they can go back. They
Sure
can
thing.
go back and get into that. But it's like kind of like there's almost like a how do I want to put this? It's a little too simple in the 1 through 99. It's like it's good, but you really want to get into a little bit of a little bit more complexity off to kind of hook adults into reading.
Sure thing. Yeah.
So when you start at 100, go to 200, you're like, oh, this was good. Then you go back, catch your 1 to 99, and then you go forward to your 200 to 300. And by the time you're 300, you're like, okay, I'm ready to get into McFarlane.
That's like months worth of work here. I would suggest
3 weeks.
Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale's Spider-Man Blue. It's basically a great introduction to the character, and you'll get a lot of his backstory. But I think you got a lot of stuff. Let's get to the last topic. And this one's from MK67DK and Andrew M. Civil War destroyed Iron Man in comics. He hasn't recovered since. Also rushing in to make Civil War 2 just to cash in on the movie. 2 big mistakes. So I like Civil War because I don't like Iron Man, and I like that he was the ultimate villain in there. There was nothing redeeming about the character. But if you like Iron Man, you can see how you hate it because he is bad.
Yep.
Yeah, boo Iron Man. I mean, Captain America and Thor are the only Avengers I appreciate.
Oh, come on, y'all.
Yeah, the others can go spin.
Well, I say this. I mean, yeah, definitely. I think Fraction said it. It's like, when did Iron Man become the villain? And he tried his best to redeem him. But that's why I think in this case, actually, I think why they did such a great job with the MCU Iron Man. They made him a lot more likable, a lot more relatable. They gave him kind of great power, great responsibility, sensibility that Peter Parker used to own, and Iron Man kind of took that place in the MCU. And yeah, you're right. Iron Man, I think, he was just kind of there, almost like, to a certain extent, if I'm offending Hal Jordan fans, I'm going to offend them. But it's kind of like he's just there. It just happens to have a ring, just happens to have his suit of armor. But it's like, because the only time I liked Iron Man really was just the whole Armor Wars thing. That's when I thought, I felt that's where a lot of where they drew the MCU character from, was from that story arc, because he just felt like he had a responsibility to the world in a way that he didn't have before. So yeah, but Civil War, making Iron Man the bad guy, it's like that was that. It feels like the naughty 90s are coming back again, and I was like, I don't know.
Well, Iron Man, Tony Stark was an asshole, even all the way back to days in the Illuminati and stuff like that. It was just what a ass wipe. You're just like, you really start to dislike the character, and I almost like, they're trying to make you dislike him because he's rich. He's a playboy. He's got all this stuff going for him. We got to have some negative things about him to kind of counterbalance that, and it just.
Well, Civil War took what could have been a philosophical disagreement and turned it into good guy versus bad guy by turning Tony into a bad guy throughout the series. Because it'd be one thing if it was just a philosophical disagreement on the future, but they had to have Tony do sneaky, underhanded shit to justify his position. And to give examples, it seemed like he was acting much more like a politician and much less like a superhero at that point. And I hate politicians, so yeah, they made him into a straight up villain instead of being just somebody that disagrees with Cap. And additionally, the ending of that series should have gone really poorly. Like the way that they ended Civil War should have been with needing to do a reconstruction. Like they all kind of look around and realize we basically destroyed all law and order in this country. And we need to come back together to rebuild it. Like, you would end up with if that actually happened, you would end up with a government that was entirely powerless when you were done, because everyone would realize the superheroes can just ignore you. You would remove all faith in the authority of government, and you would essentially plunge the country into fucking anarchy. And they took the half-assed way out of it by just making Cap just quit. So
didn't quit. He stopped because he didn't want anyone else to get hurt. But I do want to say thank you to Ryan Wilson for the $4.99 super chat. Problem with comics and getting new customers is you can't just jump in and read. It takes a lot of time and money just to get started. I agree with that. I remember the first time I went to
I disagree wholeheartedly.
You haven't been a new comic reader in 40 years. I agree with that, because I went into a new comic book or a comic shop for the first time within the last 10 years, and I was like, I went in 4 times before I actually bought a comic book because I was so overwhelmed by the amount of comic books I was looking at. I was like, I don't even know what I want to buy now. There's like 5 different Batmans. There's like 3 Spider-Mans, and I found it all confusing. And then the guys at the comic shop didn't want to talk to me. But
well, I think that's
a problem too.
I bought off a spinner rack and jumped in at X-Men 222.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you know. I think it's kind of the mindset. Yeah, there's a little bit more than that, but you're right. There was only 1 X-Men, you know, when I was reading, only 2 Spider-Mans plus Team Up and Tails, you know. So I mean, they were out there, and I wasn't. But the thing is like they weren't always readily available. So you just pick up one, and then you look in the middle of the book. There's the advert for all the books, and I'm like dreaming of all the Spider-Mans I'm going to get someday, so I can get caught up to where I'm reading. And people don't have that desire as much these days. Probably because of collections, I think.
Well, no, the big reason is because so many comics were written 30 years ago with new readers in mind.
That's true.
Modern, you essentially get 2 times a year that you can jump on, and it's it's the beginning of each next 6-issue arc.
Yeah.
So you get about 2 times, maybe 3, depending on whether or not they're double shipping that book.
Well, that's part of the collections.
And thirdly, because there's so many events going on that you can never jump in because you're always jumping in the middle of a goddamn event.
Yeah.
So
I don't agree that I don't think the arcs and these storylines and when you can jump in as a reader matters as much as people in comics think at times, because I mean, when I started comics, when I jumped into a title, I think 9 times out of 10 I was jumping in the middle of an arc because it was entertaining. Kind of what you were saying. The bigger issue is that these arcs aren't interesting to jump in on. I mean, when you're like, hey, here's the 6-issue series about She-Hulk and a reality cooking show. I mean, like, who wants to jump into that arc? It's the quality is more the problem. If the book is awesome and you jump in the middle of an arc, you're going to rapidly try and find your way back to the beginning and read more, and you're going to be hungry. And I mean, I read Fantastic Four, took a decent sized break from it, came back in the early middle of John Byrne's run. I remember like, holy crap, I didn't really care about Fantastic Four, but this is an amazing story. I love the art, I love what's going on here. And I hunted to go backward to get the rest of it. And that's the challenge here. It's you know, I think the challenge of getting people in is that it's expensive, as Ryan Wilson said, and it's you know, your hit and miss ratio is a lot more miss these days. That's the, you know, who's going to want to take a gamble on a comic book at $5 when, you know, you're more likely to get a fill-in artist or some random kind of nonsense. I mean, try and jump in on the Avengers right now. There's lots of moments where they are starting new arcs because their arcs have been going 4 issues, 6 issues. So there's plenty of opportunities to jump in, but would you want to? That's the problem.
I don't want to because it's Jason Aaron. He sucks.
I want to say thank you to Ryan Wilson. We do have another super chat from Kenneth Dowling. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Insane decision in comic history. Tom King's entire run on Batman. I'm sorry, but I hate that run. I think it actually started out okay, but I think the insane decision on that one was the wedding. And,
so
don't be sorry.
That goes back to what we were talking about earlier about a writer who has never read the character before. And Tom King clearly had not read very much Batman before he took over.
Well, he definitely had his vision of what he wanted to do with it, I guess, right? He wanted him to have like long walks on the beach and stuff like that. You know, have his little poems. It read like a Terry Moore Strangers.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
I do agree with you, Kenneth Dowling. I think it's been well documented on the channel. We just had a video not too long ago, basically how they could have kind of saved the arc beginning at issue 50. But thank you so much for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. But we do have one more super chat from Club Cosplay, the Nerds Nightclub. Most comic shops have combustibility curve. You have to try to buy. Do you agree with that one, Perch?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just, you know, it all goes back to there's too many barriers for people to get into comics. If you want to get into comics, you have to work at it. And this was not the case 20, 30 years ago. Even I like what Jermaine has been saying about the 90s. I have had said the same things. A lot of people, you know, really hold that era up as the most amazing era in comics. And it's like, you didn't live through it, man. But
yeah, that's right. Walking wounded.
Yeah, exactly. That was a tough era. But it was easier to get into comics. And I got some video. I don't remember anymore whether these videos were released or not, or where they are in the queue, but it's like, how did you get into comics? How did you start reading comics? And if you were a kid in the 70s, 80s, there was like 5 different avenues for you to get into comics, in addition to the comics being pretty accessible to read. Today, you have to work at it, and the books are expensive. They're hard to find in a lot of cases, and it's what you're saying. Shops have a combustibility curve. It's too hard, and until that problem is solved, I mean, nothing's really going to change.
Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for Club Cosplay, the Nerds Nightclub super chat, supporting the channel. Really appreciate it. All right, so let's cover the second part of this, and we'll have to wrap this up. Rushing to make Civil War II just to cash in on the movie. It certainly did feel like Civil War II wasn't thought out. I don't think they realized just how they were going to be portraying Captain Marvel and some of her cohorts, and just how excessively evil, certainly more evil than Iron Man was in Civil War. Yul, what did you think about Civil War II? Did it feel rushed, or was it just bad?
Yeah, I guess it felt, I don't know. I didn't think it really was, it just sucked. I thought it was really bad. Again, they're trying to push Captain Marvel as the character, and if that's the thing they were trying to do, in this, they failed horribly. I mean, she came out more, I mean, I know a lot of people have said it on YouTube and whatnot, but she has really came out really unlikable in that series, and pretty much anybody that touched her had like the stench of Carol. And they're trying to make Iron Man the good guy after I totally hate him already. Now, and let's not forget Avengers versus X-Men, regardless of how you felt about it, the Avengers were in the wrong, okay? They screwed everything up, and Tony Stark was involved, and it's like right after that, and now I'm supposed to root for this jerk, and and what, they killed the Hulk in that one too, right? Which is another thing with the movies, and not, I want to go see my Hulk comic book. Oh, he's dead, but we got this other one instead.
We got Yogurt Hulk. Come here.
Yeah, they killed the Hulk. They turned She-Hulk into Hulk with long hair and still no boobs.
And PTSD, don't forget, that was very popular.
They killed Rhodey. They killed Rhodey right whenever he was getting popular.
Oh, well, at least, Civil War II, there was some connection. Or they made sure to kill the black guy first again.
Because
don't forget who kicked it off, an Inhuman. But anyway.
So there you go.
It was terrible. I mean, it was a terrible event. It was the feeling. I mean, this was Bendis leaving the company. This was the comic of Bendis working his way out. He was completely uninspired. They were trying to push the Inhumans. They're trying to push Captain Marvel. They're trying to rapidly throw something out the door to tie into a movie that had nothing to do with the movie. It's just like on all fronts, it was a terrible comic. And the aftermath was terrible. All the spin-off titles that came out from Civil War II. I mean, I just reviewed, Occupy Avengers. I mean, what the hell? I mean, there's some. That was a dark, dark time in Marvel's history. I mean, and the end of Civil War II, if you remember, was doing a lot of lead-ins to Secret Empire. So this was just a nice 2-year run of shit.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that was like Bendis's like FU to the fans, or was that just the Emperor's New Clothes being exposed that maybe Bendis was a spent writer at that point?
It was that one. It was clear he was the ideas were dried up and corporate synergy. And if you were DC at that time watching that mess go down, I would have been like, oh, hang on a second. We're trying to get our cinematic movie universe going up. Why are we recruiting the guy who offended the movie people over at Marvel to the point that they asked him to leave? And then he puts out this synergy comic that is just garbage and was panned all over the industry. It took Marvel backward in sales. I mean, that was a dip. I mean, all the signs were there. The fact that Didio ran through with that is, if that's not the top bulleted item for why he was fired, I don't know what would be.
What I said. All right. Do we have anything else to say about Civil War 2 before we wrap this up?
Wash your ass.
Well, we're almost there. So I do want to say thank you to everyone. We had a great panel here today. Talked about a lot of bullshit that happened in the comic industry, things that you just can't understand why it happened. With the chats were absolutely live. You guys were having a lot of great conversations and certainly leading into a lot of stuff we talked about, during the show. And we always appreciate that. Thank you for being cordial and nice to each other, but still arguing. Because that's the fun thing about being a comic book fan is the argument, to see who's right about things. So I definitely enjoyed this one, and thank you to everyone for the support. A lot of super chats today. That was very generous of you all. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Do you have anything you wanted to say about Fantastic Comics or the Wrestling Council before we wrap this up?
I do a show called the Wrestling Council. You can look it up on YouTube, and I also run a Tuesday night live at 8 on the West Coast Fantastic Comics YouTube channel. I actually have comics these days, so I'll be talking about those.
All right, well, definitely check them out. Gervain, did you want to plug your two competitions right now? We did it in the video that we did a couple of days ago, but you got some money to give away, right?
Yeah, so at this point, the logo design for the company has ended. But I just want people who are interested to know we'll be announcing contests for logos for our character brands. But I do want to announce we did secure a domain name for our website, animatedconcepts.biz. So keep an eye out for that. About probably a week or two, we're gonna go ahead and publish live, and then we'll start sending out updates to everybody in terms of the upcoming logo contest, the focus groups that we're going to be starting in July, paid focus groups, $15 for an hour. So if you or someone who's comics casual wants to get in on the conversation, do that. But we're excited about getting the ball rolling for the launch in February next year. But keep in mind, animatedconcepts.biz. That's where you'll be able to find everything going on about Animated Concepts. Awesome.
Thank you so much. Pele, you got any good words for the people before we wrap this up?
Okay. One public service announcement. If you're into vintage comics right now and you're looking to buy, be very cautious because we're in a big bubble right now. There's a lot of books put up for sale. The market's kind of saturated, but people are still buying and they're paying record amounts of money. And just kind of take a deep breath, back away slowly, get a good perspective on this because the prices, I'm not going to say guarantee. I don't like the G word, but I will say that more than likely in a few months you're going to look back and there's going to be a lot of prices dropping. So, I don't know what's going on right now in the market, but go into it with your eyes open and be careful.
Well, thank you very much. Good looking out. Definitely, if you're buying vintage comics, watch yourself. Don't go too far over that over the street price guide recommendation. Doc, what do you got to say, buddy?
Go support Rags on Patreon.
Definitely go support Rags on Patreon. Brian Ball was in the chats earlier. He's a great guy, contributor to the channel, and he's a lovely fellow. We like him here.
Yep. Brian's a great dude, and have y'all a good weekend and get drunk.
Yeah.
Do make poor decisions, and we'll see.
Spending comics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Buying comics.
Right.
Poor decisions.
Just not buy comics right now. Don't do it.
All right, Perch. You're the last guy on your low scrotum on the totem. What do you got to say?
I just it's a great conversation. Always happy to talk to everybody, and the chat was great. Sorry I didn't participate more there, or I guess a better way. But everything. If you're looking for some things, obviously there's a lot of good projects out right now. Sean Gordon Murphy, I'll plug his thing again. His project is amazing. It's getting a lot of pages. The price per value is off the charts. So if you haven't done that yet, I strongly recommend you get in on that. But yeah, the Rags crew is wonderful. There's a lot of good people out there. So go support some comics, and hopefully I'm in your position here, Yul, within the next 30 days.
All right.
Okay.
And also, don't forget about Tim Lim and Mark Pellegrini's Walmart Gold Standard. there's a few hundred, I think maybe 200 or less copies left to be purchased on Indiegogo. And when that's out, it's out and the campaign's over. There'll be limited numbers, and they were very gracious to come on the channel if you want to check out that live stream. That was fun, but we got plenty of content coming up for you. Thank you all so much. Thank you all so very much. Sell about Poe, and I'm out.
Wash show.